Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for spending the afternoon with us. I just want to open it up by saying a couple of words about our program. National Parks at Night is more than a photo workshop program. It's the passion of 5 people to pursue, preserve, and share 2 precious things: treasured outdoor spaces and night skies. Our program takes small groups into national parks to explore the features and the night skies. We only teach at each park once. Why, you might ask? Well, because we believe life is a forward-looking adventure. We all want to experience as many of these parks as we can, and then we want to bring along the adventurous few on some curated and singular experiences. Now, we think that night photographers have some advantages over our daytime brethren. While our cameras are making long exposures, we can choose to slow down with our cameras and enjoy the scene in front of us. We've found that, honestly, your relationship with the scene changes. We seek to make every shot more meaningful, and we like to craft and not just capture. It's not a judgment of anything, but it's something that, it's sort of an attitude that you get into and you adopt. And after all, we get far fewer chances per night to make images, so why not work harder to make them count? So I like to believe that we night photographers are also a hardy and crafty bunch. And our group of 5 instructors, Gabe, Lance, Tim, Chris, and I, combine our diverse experiences to make a special breed of workshops. One where you will have amazing support for both technical and creative reasons. And also, you'll be tapping our over 50 years of combined teaching experience. The unifying dream that is National Parks at Night can be summed up this way: let's go someplace beautiful, make art with breathtaking landscapes, stunning night skies, and apply our creativity. We can each walk away a bit more humbled with unique images that bear our own fingerprint. And perhaps this will help preserve these spaces and will be our contribution to creating more curiosity, some wanderlust, and awareness of the importance of dark skies. I'm going to pass the baton now to Chris Nicholson, who literally wrote the book on photographing national parks. So please welcome Chris.
Thank you for coming today. This is an exciting topic for all of us. And when we talk about why do we do night photography in the national parks, there's 2 components to that question. One is why at night? And Matt just talked about that a bit. Is this slideshow going? Okay, great. So Matt talked a little bit about that. The other reason why we shoot at night is because we're crazy, right? We're taking an art form that by its very definition is capturing light, and we're going out and doing it when there isn't any. The second question is why national parks? And again, that's because we're crazy, because there's bears out there at night, and so are we. But the national parks, in all seriousness, a lot of people know about what they preserve. They're over 100 years old. The first one was in 1872 when Yellowstone was founded. That was the very first national park in the world. And across the globe, countries have followed suit for over 100 years. And we all know that the national parks preserve wildlife, and they preserve fantastic landscapes, and they preserve waterfalls and hot springs and pristine coastline. They preserve all this great natural stuff. But what a lot of us don't think about is that the national parks also preserve the night sky. They preserve the dark. When you go to national park areas, there's very scarce artificial light in the entire region around a park. And therefore, the skies are dark. They're dark in a way that they're not around the cities. They're dark in a way that our ancestors, for thousands of years, saw them. You go into Central Park and you look at the night sky and you'll see dozens of stars. You go into a national park and you look at the night sky, you see millions of stars. You see the Milky Way as a visible defined celestial object, not just a concept that you're reading in a book. This is why the national parks are amazing. They preserve, along with all those other things, they preserve dark. So when we want to do night photography, one of the best places, maybe the best place to do it, is in the national parks, where everything looks the way it always did before 100 years ago. So the way that we've organized the presentation today, we want to talk about the national parks and about night photography. And the way we chose to do this is by showing some of our favorite images, some of our favorite night photos from the national parks. And we're also going to show you some of the photos that we found the most challenging from our careers, and talk about the way that we overcame those challenges. The first one I'm going to show you, one of my favorites, is from Capitol Reef National Park. And the reason it's one of my favorites is because of something that it illustrates. Like I said, the national parks have a wide variety of subjects you can shoot. And in Capitol Reef, there's actually orchards from the Fruta area, which was a Mormon settlement from a century ago. And Gabe and Matt and I were there just last month. And a really good example of do as we say, not as we do. We did not scout this location. We knew we wanted to shoot there. We drove by it in the day, but we didn't even bother getting out of the car. So when we showed up at night to shoot, we had no idea what we were going to do. It was pitch black, and it took us 45 minutes to walk around in the dark trying to find some kind of a composition just with our flashlights. But what I like is that 3 people, I love this concept, even 2 people, you can go out and shoot the exact same thing with the same type of gear and come up with completely different ideas. And as an example, this is the photo that I did in the orchards in Capitol Reef. And Gabe was right next to me. Our tripod legs were literally crossing. And Gabe came up with something completely different. And I just love this concept. I mean, we both love what we do. We both have a pretty good idea of what we're doing in the same spot, same gear. It's an entirely different photo. You might not even know it's from the same spot if I hadn't told you. And then Matt, who was working only about 100 yards away from us, again, completely different concept. So not only is there a lot of variety in the parks, but even in one spot, you can find variety. And that's why I loved this experience. Just, you can see the difference, completely different take. I mean, even to the point of one being black and white. Another one of my favorites is from Acadia National Park. And the reason it's one of my favorites, it's kind of a selfish reason. As photographers, a lot we get, sometimes we get an idea, we want to go do a certain photo, and it usually doesn't work out the way that we think, which is okay. That's part of the creative process. You get out and there's obstacles, and if you're really paying attention and you're diligent, you can find a way to get around those obstacles and do something even better than you imagined. But in this case, I actually was able to pull off exactly what I had envisioned. I love the boulders, the glacial erratics on top of Cadillac Mountain in Acadia. I love the idea that these things, were dropped by glaciers in the Ice Age, and they've been sitting there for thousands of years under the same stars and under the same skies while people come and go. And who knows how many people have seen this boulder over the years, from Native Americans to now, and who's going to see it and maybe photograph it 1,000 years from now. But the whole time that boulder just sits there. And I liked that and wanted to photograph it under those stars. And this one I actually did scout, and I got there that night, and the whole thing came together. The light painting and everything just bang, bang, bang. And so that's why it was a personal favorite of mine. A couple that I found challenging, this is also in Acadia National Park. This is the Stanley Brook Bridge. There's a lot of there's carriage roads in Acadia if you've been there, and there's 17 bridges on the roads that are all architecturally unique. And this is a really good one to photograph. We had just done a workshop. We did our night workshop in Acadia last month, and a few nights before, the workshop shot on the other side of the bridge from road level, and we did a lot of light painting, group light painting. Everybody got involved, and it was a really wild experience. But I wanted to try getting up on top of the bridge and shooting something at night. So after the workshop was over, I stayed a couple extra days, and I went and did this. And it was challenging for a lot of reasons. One, I was alone. I didn't have anybody to help me with the light painting. It was pitch black, it was a new moon, and it was overcast, so there was just no light. And I'm walking around a scene, and I need a flashlight, so one of the challenges is I've got to keep my flashlight out of the scene. Also, I'm up on a hill, because I'm on, at the top of the bridge, so I have to go down the hill in the dark to do some light painting. And on top of all this, I got my setup done, and it started raining, like pouring rain. But I was far enough into it with the setup and the composition and testing the light painting and everything that I just had to do it and get soaked and just suffer through it. But I actually had to walk around. I had to go to the other side of the bridge, walk down the hill in the rain, and light from the back. There were 4 different places I lit, and then light in the tunnel, walk down the road and light back, and then also just a little bit of light glazing the top of the bridge wall right in the foreground. I didn't want to light the whole thing. This is something Gabe talks about a lot, about not lighting everything, but leaving shadow, but just kind of that little kind of glisten along the top so you see it. And at least in that way, at least the rain helped me in that regard, because you get that nice glistening effect on the rocks. One other one that was challenging is this is in the Everglades. I shot this in 2013. If you've ever shot in the Everglades, you know how hard it is to do landscape work, because it's very flat, it's very featureless. Any landscape you do tends to, you got to try to find a tree or a great cloud or something. In fact, if you look at the work of Clyde Butcher, he's a great landscape photographer based in Florida, and he does magnificent work with using the clouds as a compositional element, because down there, that's one of the only compositional elements you have. But I wanted to do a night photo, and I didn't want it to be just the ground or just the pond and the sky. I needed to add something. And one of the challenges is if you're shooting at night in the Everglades, to the east is Miami. It's a couple hours away, but it's close enough so that your camera picks up the light. Normally we try to avoid the light pollution, but in this case, I had a little bit of cloud to work with, and by pointing that way, the lights of Miami lit up the clouds, provided some depth to the photo, and just added another compositional element along with the water and the stars and the reeds. And one of the other challenges of shooting in the Everglades, just to finish this story, is, I mentioned the bears before. In the Everglades, you got the alligators. So normally, you don't worry about them, because they're generally not interested in people. They'd rather eat a bird. But I'm shooting at night, and it's a new moon, and it's completely dark, so of course, it's on my mind. And I know it's silly to be worried about it, but it's in the back of my head, and I'm an alligator. No, there's no alligators. No, I don't want to get close to the water. There's no alligators. Don't worry about it. So I'm shooting, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, right in front of me, huge splash. And it was probably a frog. It was probably a much smaller splash than it is in my memory, but I probably jumped 20 feet back, and I grabbed the camera, put it in the car, I was done for the night. But a great experience anyway. So next, Matt's going to come up and he's going to talk about a couple of his favorites and a couple of his challenges. Matt's a great longtime night photographer. You might know him. He's done a great body of work with night portraiture and his night paper project. It was fantastic. You should look it up. But come to talk about national parks, this is the creative optimist, Matt Hill.
Thanks, Chris. Gotta love your work.
Love it.
This is one of my favorites, and it's very recent from our trip through southern Utah. This is in Capitol Canyon, part of Capitol Reef National Park. The reason I love this, outside of some very strong compositional details, is that it was a moment where, sometimes when you're hiking, you're walking and you just get ahead of the pack. Are you one of those people where you walk ahead? And for some reason, the other 3 guys were walking behind and I'm walking ahead. And I stopped and I turned around and I said, "Stop!" Like, "Hey guys, can you just stop there for a second?" And Gabe, turn your flashlight. And the moment just happened. I dropped my legs. I set up the tripod, took 2 pictures, done. And it says a lot about that space. And you don't want to be there during the wrong time, which is when the water is rushing through it. It's quite dangerous. So, this image just makes me shiver. I love it. This next one is from Natural Bridges National Monument. I particularly like this one because it combines a lot of challenges in one. Number one, it's great to shoot with friends. When we were light painting this, Gabe and Chris and I, we had Gabe underneath, lighting underneath. I was over on the side, and Chris was helping operate the cameras over here. And we had to work quickly because the weather was coming in. The weather's coming in. That is one of the constant things you deal with in night photography, the weather. So in this case, we knew there was clouds and they were coming around, and it all came together where we worked together to work on the perfect light painting. It took probably, 4 or 5 tries, and then we found the right mixture of combining 2 different flashlights. And I got lucky with the meteor, and I only discovered that when I was processing. The meteor just right into the natural land bridge there. As a challenge image, another one from quite recently, I put this up here because I really loved the idea of these basins. What are they called, the basins? In Capitol Reef, these water pockets, and you have to hike all the way down and then hike back up again. The reason I put this in as a challenge is it's really hard to light paint safely sometimes. And I just want to introduce this idea. To get around on either side, there were physical challenges. And to make the perfect photograph, I would have had to do some less than ideal things. I couldn't light my way to get around some of these obstacles. So I did my best to light paint from before the 90 degrees on either side, whereas I wanted to create better shadows than that. I still think it creates some of the depth that you can see there. I wish there were more water, but I don't consider it a great success. But I do love the fact that Chris and Gabe were lighting up the distant mountain for me because they were a little bit further down the trail. It would have been pitch black without them. Thank you, guys. Yeah, and that's it for my images. Next up, Lance. Fantastic. Lance has inspired me for a long time. He wrote an amazing book on night photography, and I can't wait to learn more teaching with him. So come on up, Lance.
Thanks, Matt. And then Matt, in his introduction tonight, talked about crafting an image. And that kind of ties in with what Michael said yesterday. And that's very much a factor or a part of, I think, night photography because it's often about transformation. So, you're often seeing one thing when you're there, and then the photograph ends up becoming completely different over time. And in a way, you can interact and literally craft or build this photograph during a long exposure. It's not like a fraction of a second. You actually have time to go in and light an image or in some other way kind of build it into something other than it would be on its own. So this image is from the ghost town of Rhyolite outside of Death Valley. And it is one of my favorites. And what I really like about it is the circumstance. And for me, oftentimes the experience making an image is as important or nearly as important as the resulting image. So in this case, everything, it was kind of like the perfect storm, but in reverse. Everything came together just right. It was a moonless night. There was a little bit of an atmospheric glow in the background from the town of Beatty nearby, and that just added that little bit of glow on the horizon. There are a couple of buildings that have lights on them in the distance. They're maybe like 300 yards away, and there's a sodium vapor light, which is kind of yellow, and you can see that little bit of yellow. And then there's this little greenish edge on that building there, and that's a mercury vapor light that was nearby. And because of the two walls are at different angles, they caught different colors of the light. But it was normally when you have long exposures like that, the artificial light will become overexposed and get washed out. But here they were far enough away that they just slowly accumulated and built up over time. So this is a 30-minute single exposure, and that's rather long for digital images. They tend to get noisy after a while, but it's a relatively cool night. The camera kept cool, and it was it turned out to be a very clean image, which I liked very much. And I like, one of the things that I get most satisfaction from is being able to craft that image as fully as possible in camera. I'm not opposed to, combining bits of this image and that image to get it if you need to, but I really prefer to do it all in camera in one shot. And the last part of this image that comes together is the light painting, which I did on the front of the structure, from both sides at a very oblique angle to bring out the texture in the stones there. But my light painting, I like to keep it very subtle. I want it not to stand out and be, bold and blatant and obvious. But so again, everything just kind of came together on this night, and I just really remember the experience of being there and making the image. So that for me is why this one's particularly special to me. And it's also technically just perfect. There's no real flaws to it. All right. So this image is near the Furnace Creek area of Death Valley, and I was here with a group and we're photographing. Most people, when they're photographing starry night skies, they're out for the Milky Way, and clouds like this are, they don't like them. They think that's a problem. For me, I like that mixture of starry skies and clouds, and just photographing the arch of the Milky Way, often it's not enough for me. The experience of being under a dark sky in a national park and seeing that Milky Way, it's just so much more richer than seeing the photograph of itself of the Milky Way. Anyway, so this image, this is what I had intended to take, and I made this, and the clouds came in, and they're moving nicely, and then you talk about turning around and looking behind you and seeing what you were missing, was this. And it's not what I do. I don't photograph people. It's very atypical, anomalous of my work, but I thought it captured so well the experience that we were having out there. Much of my work is made at the intersection of the built and the natural environment. Another thing that Michael said yesterday that I really connected to. I always like that man-made elements in the natural landscape. So this, the four people on here, and that is me sitting up looking into space, so it's a self-portrait. We are on top of the water tank at Death Valley that provides water for the entire village of Furnace Creek. And that's what that round cap is there. It's the center of this gigantic buried water tower. But I just really love the way this conveyed, I think, pretty nicely the experience that we were all having being out there. So, all right, here we go. This image, another one from Death Valley, and this is a challenge. It was made collaboratively with a workshop group, and the real challenge to it, well, there's technical challenges, getting enough depth of field in this image, but mostly it was about the lighting. So it was during a workshop, and we're all working collaboratively, and we've got 4 different people doing the lighting on this shot. And the most distant person lighting the most distant hillside in the background was probably 300 yards away. So we really couldn't communicate with each other very clearly. And they're also kind of like each hiding behind the hillside so they didn't show up with their own flashlights. So it took a lot of coordination to make this happen, to make it really work well. I think we did it 5 or 6 times. There's always, in each shot, there's one bit of light that didn't quite work out. The bush in the foreground was too hot. Just something wasn't quite right. Somebody came out and shone their light, and they showed up in the image. And we were determined to get it all in that one shot. That was kind of what was the goal of this thing. And everybody's got a different flashlight, and they're all different colors. But, and also at the same time, the weather, the clouds are coming in, the stars are disappearing. And in the end, it came together, and there's a lot of satisfaction from doing that. I like working collaboratively with people, whether it's friends like my partners here or students in a workshop. Okay, and then finally, this is a challenge. This image was a challenge for me technically, it's difficult to achieve that bluish light in the center of the frame. It's called the zodiacal light, and it happens every year near the vernal and the autumnal equinox, and it just appears in the sky in the spring, slightly after sunset for about 10 days. And basically, it's sunlight reflected off of meteor particles in the upper atmosphere, and it just creates this very faint bluish glow in the sky. But it's so faint, and at this point there was no moon whatsoever. The exposure was shot at 12,800 ISO, and it's a 15-second exposure to keep the stars as points of light, wide open aperture, and I also really wanted to get the reflection of the stars in the water. And I didn't mention that this is actually a panoramic images of 2 vertical files stitched together. Three images. So all of these technical challenges made it very rewarding to be able to pull it off and show this unique celestial phenomenon that most people aren't aware of and certainly never experience. So that's what I've got, and I'd like to introduce now Tim Cooper, who's been teaching photography for over 20 years, and somebody whose work I admire very much, and I just love the lighting that this man does out in the field. So here you go, Tim.
All right. Well, thanks, Lance. You know, when we first came up with this project, they're like, yeah, we're going to get 2 images that are our favorites and 2 that are our challenges. And I thought, all my images are challenges, you know? I was like, okay, I can pick any image I want. Night photography is a challenge. And I think it's a challenge because we're really seeing through different eyes. We're seeing when we can see. We're seeing through different eyes. And I really enjoy that process. I've been a landscape photographer most of my life, and in landscape photography, you're seeing what you see. You know, you want to imagine different clouds, you want to imagine different light, but we're basically capturing what we see. And night photography is so different because in many ways, we're creating light that isn't there. And so Ansel Adams, he coined a phrase called pre-visualization. And I know he coined this phrase because every time I type it in, word check says it's not a word. But pre-visualization is seeing your shot before you actually make it. That's a challenge. For this shot, one of my favorite things about it was Lance and I were actually shooting in this very same spot together. And my challenge on this one was, how am I gonna make my shot different than Lance? I'm standing next to a guy that's been doing this for 30 years, and I thought, how am I gonna make it different? So our light painting styles are a little bit, a little different. I'm a little bit more cinematic. And my idea when I'm painting with light is that I really want to bring a lot of openness to the shadows, and I want to make it look like there's several lights on either side. Lance is a little bit more subtle than I am. So it was kind of tough for me to do this, but I was very happy to achieve what I did here because we were working under full moon light. So all that light you see on the background is all full moon light. And the stars are actually star points simply because they are 30-second exposure. So we're getting nice sharp points. So, I remember when I was taking the shot, I thought to myself, I think I get more exercise when I do light painting at night than I do the rest of the day. Because literally this is a 30-second shot and I'm running from one side of the scene to the other side of the scene with my flashlight, turning it on and off, leaping in front of the camera, painting, and running to the other side. And it took me many, many tries to get this shot. It was probably, maybe 10 or 12 different shots to get this one. So I was pretty excited about it. And also it sort of marked our first NPAN workshop. So this was actually in Zion National Park. And Zion's a great place to shoot at night for sure. The way the moonlight bounces off the cliffs is just absolutely fascinating. And there's a lot of these little tiny trees. And here's another shot I did several years earlier. And this one was kind of fun because I thought everybody shoots this tree. It's kind of not right near the road, but close enough that everybody finds it, And I thought, all right, I'm gonna shoot this tree at night. I wanna do something different. So I sort of found the North Star, made some plans, and most of this is actually under full moonlight. So I couldn't run a really super long exposure of 30 minutes because the background mountain would have blown out and got too overexposed. So what I did was I did a series of 5-minute exposures and then stacked them together to create the star trails. Of course, it's all rolling around the North Star there, and I did some light painting in the foreground, so the closest cliff to us is illuminated by a flashlight. The far cliff in the back is illuminated by the moon. So this came together really nicely. It was one of the first shots where I thought, you know, I really like this. I like this light painting thing, you know, this night photography thing. So I was pretty happy with that one. This was a super big challenge for me. And, you know, one of my nighttime lectures, you know, simply states, it's dark out there. And when it's a new moon, it is super dark. This was pitch black. So I'm not talking about, oh, you know, there's a faint moonlight. Literally, I couldn't see the other photographers who were standing next to me. And so we had 3 tripods set up, and it was my job to light paint the arch, right? So if you guys look at this foreground, it's all rocks, you know, and they're not small rocks. And if you walk through the gap, there's a big drop off, you know? So what I had to do was literally light paint this thing without falling over. But I had to do it in such a way that my flashlight was hidden from view. So I couldn't put the flashlight on the ground to walk around because that would have ruined it, you know, because we want to paint at these nice oblique angles. So, you know, I painted the foreground in 2 shots, 1 from each side. But literally, I had to crawl on my hands and knees from location to location and feel the rocks so I could actually get by. So this was a really tough image. And then at the end, what I did, I don't know where I started doing this. It actually happened by accident one time. But I began pointing my flashlight back at the camera and creating that little star. So a lot of people think it's a moon. It's just me pointing my camera back at the flashlight. So this overall exposure was 20-minute exposure, I think at f2.8. So for 15 minutes, I was crawling around, skin knees, hoping I wasn't going to go over a cliff. But I was really happy with the result in the end. So, and then my last image, we've heard several times from several people on the stage, collaboration. And I think we all like to work together. I know I certainly do out in the field, especially on our workshops. We try to get people to work together because it's so much easier to make an image when you have several people thinking, several flashlights going, several people clicking the shutters. This time I was alone. I was up in Rhyolite, which is just outside of Death Valley. And this image started to come together, as images for me often do. As I'm working on them, I start to see into it. And I'll paint one thing and, you know, watch the clouds, and I'll come back and I'll look at the LCD and I'll think, okay, well, maybe I want to do this, or maybe I want to do that. And it transforms as it goes along. But what I realized was that in order to get the good exposure for the moonlit foreground, so basically the foreground in this has no light painting whatsoever. In order to get the moonlight proper on that and get a good exposure for the sky, I think it was about 3 minutes at f8. So I couldn't get around to paint all of these buildings, and you could see the buildings go all the way back. So what I actually had to do was take a series of, I think this is either 4 or 5 different exposures. And Lance was just saying that he likes to try to get it all in one shot, and I think that's a really noble goal. And sometimes you just can't do it. So having a little bit of Photoshop knowledge helps here. So what I actually had to do was shoot these 5 different shots, and each one I painted a little bit differently. So for the one, I stood in the doorway and I just held the flashlight and painted the inside of the building, which was white, so I would be silhouetted. Then I painted a little bit on the outside. And then the next exposure, I had to go around and paint another wall, and then another wall. And so what I ended up having to do was combine them all into Photoshop as if I had actually the time to walk around and paint all these things. So it was quite the challenge, but overall I was pretty darn happy with my results. So if you're thinking about getting into night photography or you're just starting, do realize this, that even though we've all been doing this a long time and you know, we may show you our favorite images, it is a challenge and it can be difficult, and we struggle at it too. So don't let that stop you from playing. Next up is Gabriel, and I got to tell you, most of you all may know Gabriel. He's an awesome guy, one of my closest friends. He's probably taught me just about everything I know about night photography. So big hand to Gabriel.
Well, thanks, Tim. You were, you know, we did our first, Tim and I did our first workshop about 4 or 5 years ago, I proposed an idea that we go to do a national park, go to Zion, but we also started off in Vegas, and we explore Vegas and the varying things that Vegas can offer, which we were kind of experimenting with or pursuing some of the ghost towns near Vegas, and that was a very, very special. We jumped right into it, and you were a quick study, I'll say, and right apt to it. So, again, my name is Gabriel, and the question really tonight, which you've heard in various forms, is to capture or to create. And as we go on our adventures, whether it's on our feet or in boats or in planes or however we may go, that's the question that's always going on in my head. There's no wrong answer here, because when we capture, we could be capturing anything from that moment with family, those special moments, those snapshots that are really important and that I've been not doing a good job at because I focused on creating maybe more than I should. And sometimes it's you have to just capture and seize those little moments of time, right? I'm more focused as an artist, I guess, for creating, and as a night photographer, sort of assembling many moments of time to create something that we can pre-visualize, but also I'm always happy when there's a surprise. You know, I got into photography and I was in the darkroom, and I will not, that mystery of watching that print come up in the sink, in the tray, is just still to this day is magic, right? And so I want to make sure that magic still stays with me. And the easiest way is through the night, because we can play easily with time, okay? I'm going to debut an image that only a few of you have seen on my phone, and I took a few weeks ago. If you're at the Acadia workshop, which I see several of you here, I took this on the last night, right here. We've talked about panoramic images and inclusive images. This was taken with a 360-degree camera, okay? And I really like this image. I was playing with it. This is Scudic Point in Acadia. And it was funny. I was like, oh, I'll light paint sort of the Earth, the tiny planet that surrounds me. And I took that shot first, and I'm like, wait a minute. Actually, the shot, we're often told, or we teach our class, that actually you want to make sure when you're doing any light painting that the camera doesn't see your light. We don't want that trail of light coming in. We want the paint from that, the light from it to be reflected. We want that in there. But I accidentally caught my flashlight in this image, and I said, well, that's actually the shot, is the light coming from it, creating that more prominent silhouette standing on the top of the world. Also light painting, also opening it up, and also getting that arc of that Milky Way right above it. And this image was taken with a toy. This was taken with I don't want to say a toy. It was taken with let's call it was the Ricoh Theta S, which is really a point and shoot camera, which again, if you would have asked me a year ago, 3 months ago, 6 months ago, I would have told you that no point and shoot can take really good night images. Yet I love this image, and I'm really, happy to kind of debut it with you here today. Another one of my favorites, again, the common theme we've heard tonight is collaboration. This was a collaborative effort. Capitol Reef again, we're going back to Capitol Reef. A very wonderful spot. You saw the orchards, you saw one of Matt's from going into, the ancient river. And this was a shot that we kind of did the right way. Chris reminded me the other day, you know what, we did this shot the right way because we scouted it. We went there during the day, saw what there was, and it was kind of easy. It was called Vista Point, so we knew something good had to be up there, right? Or is it called Panoramic Point? I think it was called Panoramic Point. Yeah. So we went up there and we said, oh, this is a pretty good panoramic. How can we make it ours? How can we create something here? With that, we have that wonderful sort of S road cutting through this beautiful area of our world. And again, technology, if we use it creatively, We can help push those night visions along, or any vision. I'm more concerned with the night. So I don't know who it was, but the three of us were standing up there, and I don't know which one of us came up with the idea, but Matt had his pixel stick and said, what if I drive through this? You know, we've all seen the car trails. We're familiar with sort of car trail shots, but what if we hold this pixel stick, which is sort of like a lightsaber of light, and we hold that through the moon roof, we were calling it, not a sky roof, a moon roof, as we drive through. And it's those what if moments that, again, I love the surprise. We didn't know, we had a good idea of what it would look like. We experimented with colors. And I was in charge of setting up our 3 cameras, or each one of us picked a spot, but I was sort of in charge of making sure they were triggering, and then I would have, again, the collaboration. They were parked and all the way up the hill, so I would signal them with my flashlight. They would start to drive down, and then we would communicate. Slower, faster, let's change colors. And I just really love this work. And in fact, Chris just posted on our blog his image of this, and he chose the different color. So I also like that, again, getting back to that, that we can all stand at the same place and choose and see things differently. So this is just a really wonderful what if, pursue, challenge, and one of my favorite shots. Another shot, which was a challenge, and also a collaborative effort here. This was on the Acadia workshop that we just got finished about a month ago. Now, the challenge in Acadia, for us at least, was what do you do when it rains every night? Well, you know, you can go under the bridges. You saw a shot of Chris's challenge image, and he was on top of the bridge. But of course, under these beautiful bridges, they offer cover. So I remember we started this night up on top of Cadillac Mountain before the rain came, and we were getting some great vistas up there, as well as working with the rocks and everything. And then it started the rain. Some of the students went home. For the ones that stayed out, and I see at least one of them here who stayed out, we went under this. I said, let's keep shooting. I'm not ready to go to bed. I don't go to bed until 2 or 3 in the morning. It's getting me up in the morning, and it's the hard thing. So he said we could go under here, and we actually worked it that we had, but Chris was on one side looking out the other tunnel, and he was doing something completely different, and actually light painting with car headlights, which I had challenged us to use car headlights in the workshop, and I love that we were doing that. And then I was doing this on the other side. You'll see a flashlight is that red light. Then I used a flash. So again, what tools do you have? How can you use them, and how can you play with them to be more creative? So I popped the flash various times. That's the white light. And then I used the red light going on. And I really love sort of the reflection and the rim sort of light. And again, that's sort of one of those, I didn't know that was gonna happen. And it's a wonderful little surprise. Another challenge, and let's go away from our country's national parks. This is, you might recognize it as the Galapagos. And for those of you who are on the Galapagos trip, I was very fortunate enough to go with Lindblad Expeditions last winter, wearing my B&H hat. I went there. We have a wonderful relationship with them, and part of our relationship is that we send a couple of our reps out with a bunch of gear onto the ship so that you can use these. Sometimes these tools, again, that might not be accessible to you, and it only might be used or needed for these sort of adventures. And so when they asked me to go on this trip, I said, I'm not really a wildlife guy, but I'll go to the Galapagos, I'll go. And of course, 7,000 pictures later on day 2, because the wildlife just comes up to you and it's amazing and it's beautiful. But the whole time, as soon as they asked me, I said, well, where can we shoot at night? Where can we shoot at night? But these islands, there's only 2 islands that you can access at night, and those are the populated islands, and they're not really, we did one walk one night, but it's not really what I'm looking for. I wanted to hopefully be on an island with these animals and the stars and everything like that. And I was kind of going crazy a little bit on the boat because I couldn't shoot I could shoot. I had 10,000 images in the can, but I couldn't get a night shot in. And I can do that. I can take breaks from night photography, but no more than a week. So I asked that question: what if I put the camera on top of the ship, and they were heading out, they were driving the whole time here, and obviously, we're rocking back and forth, but because the camera is rocking with the boat, it's sharp. It's the stars. And I've been shooting the night for 20 years. I've never seen these sort of like crayon or etched stars that I've before. And it just blew my mind, to again ask that question, what if, and be surprised. And this is I think about a 30 or 45 minute exposure on that boat. So again, keep asking those questions, keep saying what if, and capture and create. I want to show you a little slideshow from behind the scenes from some of the workshops that we've done. And again, what's your next adventure? You've seen some really amazing speakers here. What's inspired you? Maybe you've seen some really great tools outside. What has inspired you to help you get along to your next adventure? And where will it be? There's the movie Smoke, which Harvey Keitel takes the same picture at the same block every day. And it's amazing, and that's his adventure, right? Where is your next adventure? Is it on your block? Is it on a Lindblad excursion? Is it with National Parks at Night? Or is it on your own with friends, collaborating? It can be any of these things, but just make sure that you continue to keep on clicking, right? That's why we're all here. We like that. Longer clicks for us up here, the night photographers. We want to continue to make sure they'll keep on clicking. Just to wrap things up here, if you haven't, National Parks at Night, we do have a booth right outside. If you sign up for a mailing list, you get this free ebook that's all 5 of us, and it gives you 20 tips for night photography. So if you come to our booth, sign up. You can do it online. And just sign up for our mailing list, and that gets you in. It's a beautiful book. Chris put it together, but it features all of our work, or some of our favorite work with tips on it. We'll also be doing some book signings. I think we have Lance's book and Chris's book still at the table. We've sold out of Tim and mine. I know that B&H sells both Tim and mine book, which are the ones, this is Lance, that's Chris. Tim's got a wonderful book on HDR, mine's on the night photography. But feel free to also follow us on our adventures on Facebook, on Instagram, and on the tweets and stuff like that. I want to also give a wonderful thank you to B&H for really putting this together and really believing in the people that are on the stage and supporting sort of you guys' adventures. This has just been an amazing event. I hope you've explored all the levels, right? All the different stages and the levels, and shared your feelings and your time with some of the people outside. Everyone has a story to tell. And maybe in the next year or the next year after we do with Optic, maybe you'll have a story to tell us and share with us here on stage. Thank you for your time, folks.
Whether you're a hobbyist or a professional, B&H has the answers to your questions. Experience a world of technology at our New York City Superstore. Connect with us online or give us a call. Our staff of experts is happy to help.